Nation, I'm Brandon Adams. Welcome into a Kroger commitment special. We have gigantic breaking news to give to you. Just coming across social media a moment ago, five-star quarterback for the class of 2022, Gunner Stockton, formerly a South Carolina commit, who had decommitted from that program after the turmoil that led to Will Muschamp's ouster there as head coach, has just committed to the Georgia Bulldogs. So Stockton will be a part of Georgia's 2022 class here. This will be viewed in some respects as a little bit of a recruiting upset, given the fact that the offensive coordinator that Stockton had pledged his recruitment to when he was at South Carolina, Mike Bobo, was at Auburn. Some thought that Auburn would then have the inside track on getting the commitment from Stockton because of the relationship that Bobo's family had with Stockton's family, and yet that is not to be. Georgia working quickly here after the South Carolina decommitment to put itself in a position to win this recruiting battle. There had been a ton of online chatter about this over the course of the last 12 hours or so. A lot of the biggest names in the recruiting industry talking about the possibility that Stockton could be here. The online predictions were kind of moving in that direction for UGA, and it is now official, or as official as a commitment can get, with Stockton on Twitter tagging Buster Faulkner, the Georgia offensive analyst, Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator, and pledging his desire to be a part of this 2022 class from Georgia. We will hear over the course of the next couple of minutes from Stockton back in September, or I should say going back to almost a year ago now, some of the things that he had said about Georgia at the time, his belief in UGA, what he liked about the program then, essentially maybe even more so now that it'll officially be a part of this class. We're going to try to talk to Jeff Sintel here. Coming up in a moment, we'll get Jeff's thoughts on the accelerated timeline that's caused this to happen. And frankly, what I think for many of us, the surprising nature of this. And, we'll obviously deal with all of this. Obviously, I think the big thing that comes to mind for a lot of Georgia fans in the wake of this is the fact that Georgia has a five-star quarterback signing for the class of 2021, Brock Vandegrift. And by bringing in Stockton here as a member of the 2022 class, Georgia could be setting up, and we've seen this before from Georgia in the Kirby Smart era, one of these epic quarterback battles, competitions for playing time. Obviously, with two kind of alpha dog type guys, Vandegrift a year older, Stockton coming in a year behind that, setting up a big time competition between these two. Admittedly, I have said, and for those of you that watch Dog Nation Daily regularly, you've heard me say this, that I'm not quite so sure I'd go five-star the year after bringing in a Brock Vandegrift, but I also said that if it were to happen, I will prove myself to be a total hypocrite, and as a Georgia fan, celebrate that move. I will now do all of those things, completely disregard anything I've said about this in the past, treat this as the good news that it absolutely is, and with everyone else, join in the curiosity of wondering, well, how exactly is all this going to work together, and what exactly was Georgia's pitch to Stockton to get him to join the fold here, just given the fact that he sees Vandegrift in front of him. Of course, these two quarterbacks did meet head-to-head on the field this past season to begin the year. Vandegrift's Prince Avenue Christian team going down to defeat to Gunner Stockton, the Rabun County team. Rabun County is a bigger classification, a little bit more talented team, so I don't read too much into the head-to-head win for Rabun over Prince Avenue Christian, but that did go down. So that's there. This will be a huge blow to the start of the Mike Bobo era at Auburn. One of the things that I think he was hired at Auburn to do was the belief that he might give new coach Brian Harsin the inside track on Stockton here, and Bobo not able to make good on that. The Harsin era at Auburn not beginning with a big-time quarterback commitment like this will obviously be a huge blow to Auburn fans and really, just accentuating the challenges that a new coaching staff like this is going to face at Auburn. Even someone like Bobo, who had the deep relationship with Stockton, who knows the landscape of the SEC very well. This will obviously be a really debilitating blow to Auburn fans for certain, and the Auburn program probably there as well. Because there you see it on your screen, very nice edit. Good-looking throwing motion from Stockton there in his Rabun County uniform. Then with the UGA uniform on top of that, the committed Go Dogs. The one thing you should know about Stockton, you see him there throwing the football. Stockton's also a very athletic player. He's been compared in some circles to Sam Ehlinger, the former Texas quarterback, who was very good with his legs, but also had a bit of a stocky running style. No pun intended on the last name for Stockton there. You saw that a good bit from him in the very high-profile win that his Rabun County team had over Prince Avenue Christian earlier in the year. Stockton ran a lot in that game and really had no problem lowering his shoulder, showing a real physical running style. This is not a delicate flower back there in the pocket. This is a guy who's willing to show some physicality and really kind of use that body to his advantage. We kind of saw some of that. The other thing here about bringing in a five-star quarterback, good that Georgia gets him, and if you're a Georgia fan, glad that one of your rivals didn't get him. In addition to what Stockton brings to the table as a big-time quarterback prospect, there's also the degree to which that quarterbacks become magnets for other players as well. This is an incredibly deep year for talent in the state of Georgia. The Georgia momentum, would seem to be, able to take shape here now that Stockton's in the fold. There are a number of high-profile 2022 prospects over the course of the next 5-6 weeks who are slated to make their college decisions. Those choices coming on the heels of Gunner Stockton making this move could only seem to help Georgia here. So the value from Stockton is not just what he brings to the table for Georgia, even though that talent is prodigious. It's also related to what he has a chance to bring into the fold with him. Quarterbacks just kind of have that power there when it comes to all this. The other thing that you'll say is this pretty clearly demonstrates an attitude for Stockton of the way that you want your quarterbacks to be, the kind of alpha dog, fearless mentality. Gunner Stockton would certainly seem to be showing that here by looking at the quarterback depth already present at Georgia. I mentioned Griff a moment ago, but you have to mention, someone like Carson Beck in this discussion as well, the former four-star signee, who by the time Stockton arrives, assuming that that Beck sticks around, will be a couple of years removed from high school there at that point in time, and yet really no indication that Stockton has any fear about that whatsoever. The overall bottom line takeaway on all of this is the Georgia quarterback room just got a lot deeper, and Georgia has pulled one of the biggest shockers of the 2022 recruiting cycle, and it does it here early in the process. Former South Carolina commit, the five-star quarterback, Gunner Stockton, has chosen the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia winning this battle head-to-head with Auburn. Many people thought Auburn would have the inside track. There were also those, Jeff Sintel included, who said that Georgia would not stop its recruitment of Gunner Stockton, and that has proven to be true here. The relationship-building expertise of this Georgia coaching staff once again coming to the forefront. And as you saw a moment ago, with the tagging of Buster Faulkner and the tagging of Todd Monken in the tweet from Gunner Stockton, I think it'll be interesting to hear just how instrumental Todd Monken, still relatively new into his Georgia coaching career, how instrumental he was in this recruitment. We've gotten to know Monken as a play caller. We saw some examples of that on the field here this season. We are now maybe getting acquainted with his ability to be a recruiter as well. You can say that he played a role in JT Daniels' decision to leave USC and come to Georgia, and now maybe playing a big role in the decision of Gunner Stockton to join a crowded quarterback situation there at UGA. It's a Kroger commitment special. Gunner Stockton, five-star quarterback for the class of 2022, has chosen the Georgia Bulldogs. Can we hear from Gunner Stockton? Do we have that available? Let's go back to last March. Gunner interviewed by our Dog Nation recruiting insider Jeff Sintel on his feelings about Georgia, what his experiences were then. This is pretty telling what he said several months ago about a process that has now led to a Georgia commitment. Let you hear Gunner Stockton in his own words with our Jeff Sintel from months ago.
Just the relationship aspect of making sure I feel at home and just knowing that I would fit in there.
How do you feel about Georgia? What's the relationship like with Kirby?
Anytime, going to Georgia, it's your hometown state, and it would be really cool if I went there.
So obviously appreciating the hometown vibe even back then. I think it will be curious to see how much of that hometown pull mattered to Stockton. A lot of Georgia fans up there in Rabun County, the Warner family, a lot of folks that kind of live up there in that North Georgia area. Be interesting to see, how much of a pull that home state appeal was for Gunner Stockton and all of this. Gigantic news. Gunner Stockton has committed to the Georgia Bulldogs here for the class of 2022. Georgia pulls itself a good one, setting up a big-time quarterback competition. We're going to get Jeff Sintel. We'll talk to Jeff about how all of this came together and the very rapid pace by which it did. And we'll turn our attention to some comments here too for a moment. And we will kind of find out what people are saying. A lot of folks just talking about the overwhelming amount of quarterback depth that Georgia has in place right now. In fact, why don't we read a few more of those comments right now? Robbie Pearson says that Kirby Smart needs to make sure he plays the right quarterback this time. Ben Green, I agree with what Ben Green's saying here. He says, y'all are talking about the past. You need to be talking about the future. And obviously what people are referencing here is the fact that when Georgia's had quarterback decisions in the past, there's a lot of evidence to suggest in the competition between Jake Fromm and Justin Fields that Georgia probably chose the wrong guy. Fields is going to be a first-round pick. Jake Fromm left Georgia after his junior season to be a far lower draft pick than that, and maybe some hesitancy from some Georgia fans to wonder how all of this is going to play out right now. I think the presence of good players is never a bad thing, and I think that Ben in the comment section is right to say that the future opportunity here for Georgia is one that can't be disregarded, and maybe there's a chance that Smart, who was very young in his coaching career when the Fields decision was made in 2018, maybe something was learned from all of that, and maybe we'll see that play out here in a couple of years. With all that said, let's take a trip to the telephones here. We'll bring in Jeff Sintel, who was good enough to give me a little bit of a tip-off that this might be coming today, and obviously, Jeff, this is huge news. As big a news as you can get, I would say, early in the 2022 recruiting cycle. Do two things for me here for a moment. Talk to me about, I guess start with this, the speed by which all of this came together. How was it that this momentum for Stockton coming to Georgia, and I would say, surprisingly spurning Auburn, just given the relationship that he had with Mike Bobo, how did all this come together so fast?
Well, Mike, if you lived in the Stockton house for the last 3 or 4, excuse me, Brandon, I said if you've lived in the Stockton house for the last 3 or 4 weeks, I don't know if the cattle have been eating. I don't know if his Gunner CB radio has gotten much use. It's kind of just been a burden for this family to just figure out. He's been on so many Zoom calls. He's been on so many meetings. There was really just Georgia, Auburn, and then South Carolina a little bit. And I always say this, Brandon, Gunner is like the 1985 recruit to me. Like, Gunner's moods and mannerisms are fit for that era. What I mean by that is he wasn't going to ever do anything to interfere with his season. If a 7-on-7 camp or an opening camp would cause him to miss a workout with his team, well, quarterback doesn't miss a workout. Quarterback's there every day, just like the backup nose guard. He's very much team-driven, and he wanted to get this done and out of the way. And, Brandon, this is one of those transformative, I think, shockwave, building block, anchor-type weeks for Georgia's 2022 class. If we want to make some references to some good Scorsese movies, Gunner Stockton is a made guy. He is a connected guy. I would say through, 6th grade, Gwinnett All-Star Football, FBUs, Army All-American, 7-on-7. Gunner's been the quarterback for the very high-profile 7-on-7 Hustle Inc. team for the last couple of years. And, he knows basically everybody. And I think this is a momentum-building moment for the 2022 cycle. And, Brandon, I know everybody on the feed and everybody over there is wondering about, oh, no, there goes Georgia stacking up quarterbacks again. Well, two things. First of all, you got to think about Georgia's quarterback recruiting under Kirby Smart. And let's give 80% credit to Mike Bobo, actually, and Mark Richt for Jacob Easton. So Jacob Easton was a 5-star in 2016. He was number 5 overall. 2017, Jake Fromm was a 5-star to some folks. He was number 44 overall. Justin Fields, number 2 overall in 2018. In 2019, you have a top 300 recruit in Dwan Mathis. In 2020, you have a bunch. You have a top 250 recruit in Carson Beck. You have a 4-star graduate transfer in Jamie Newman. And then you have a 5-star, number 16 overall recruit transfer JT Daniels in 2020. Then you go to 2021, and you have the number 16 overall recruit, another 5-star in Brock Vandegrift. And then you go to 2022. Gunner Stockton at one point was the number 2 player in the country. Now he's the number 27 player in the country, another 5-star. Brandon, some schools would love to have just 2 of those guys. Some schools have never had 2 of those guys, 3 of those guys rated that highly, and Georgia has just been stacking them up like cord wood since 2016. So that's the one thing that everybody's got to get full circle here. The second thing, and it is the question of the day. I've already heard you and your and your show this morning, some of your listeners are already all about it. Well, this is different, I think, because Gunner Stockton is a guy, and this is in the story that's up here on DogNation.com. I've got a couple more stories that are going to go up in the next hour or so, kind of really trying to get our arms around this and what it means for Georgia. But for Gunner, he's a guy, if he's not playing and somebody's ahead of him, then he's going to look internally. He's going to think, okay, this is where I got to get better. This is where I got to find another gear to what I'm trying to do if I want to be the guy on the field. He's not going to look to the transfer portal, not even first read, second read, or third read, because he's from a family of achievers. His sister is a scholarship sophomore at Presbyterian College, a great high school basketball player. His dad is the defensive coordinator at Raven. His dad is on the Hall of Fame at Georgia Southern. His mother was a great high school and small college basketball players. They don't pull the ripcord and try to portal somewhere else. They try to get better. And that's the way I think most should look at this decision right here at the outset.
A couple things I'm really curious about. Todd Monken was tagged by Stockton in his commitment announcement. We've gotten to know Todd Monken as an offensive coordinator. We've seen his play calling style. I think we're still getting acquainted with him, though, as a recruiter. Based on your knowledge of this, how instrumental was Monken's presence in the ultimate decision for Stockton to come to UGA?
I think it's a bunch of names. I think it's Kirby. Kirby is the maestro, I guess, of all things Georgia recruiting. I think it's Todd Monken. Monken in Georgia and Smart, and you got to include Buster Faulkner here as well. Those are guys that have been, when Gunner Stockton committed to South Carolina, that was all good. They still kept him as the number one quarterback on the board. When Gunner Stockton decommitted from South Carolina, then that was certainly their time to get into that race. And I think the thing there that Georgia had to overcome, and, from talking to his father before this decision, and those comments have been released in the Dog Nation story, probably the hardest thing Gunner's ever had to do. I think some color on this decision is, when he got off the phone with Mike Bobo and told Auburn what he was going to do, it wasn't a fun day. And he kind of felt like his son, Gunner, kind of felt like he let Mike down, even though they have the utmost respect for Mike Bobo and his family. Mike Bobo, his father, George, the great retired Georgia high school football coach, well respected. That's who actually taught Gunner how to really spin the ball when he was like 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. The Stocktons consider the Bobos to be family, and they love that family, the entire family. So they love Mike Bobo. So choosing to go in a different direction because they felt the stability, they felt the guys that were going to go play with him, and there's a bunch of them, Brandon. We'll be writing about them soon, but the guys that Stockton is going to move the needle here for, that whole package, the University of Georgia, Charlie Warner played there. I think the lead to my story shows a very strong relationship that I know a lot of Georgia Bulldog fans can relate to in terms of his dear grandmother. All that stuff for Georgia, the stability, play for championships, those were the deciding factors here. Comfort, and then relationships. I think in some ways, Brendan, it felt like a shell game, or like the cards were currently changing with like Bobo moving here to there, and then Bill Muschamp moving away, and then Shane Beamer coming on. And then with Georgia, the very strong likelihood is a guy like Kirby's going to be there. With stability, I think, is a very big word about if they go to Georgia, they know things are going to be pretty much the same in 3 or 4 years as they are now.
I will admit something to you here, Jeff. I'm a fan, and as a fan, I'm obviously happy to have a player of Stockton's caliber in Georgia's 2022 class. I am just as happy that he's not going to Auburn. For me, honesty compels me to admit that this is as big a win in terms of what Georgia is getting as it is in terms of what it's preventing a school like Auburn to be able to get. Stockton could have gone to South Carolina and never really been a thorn in Georgia's side because South Carolina doesn't have much going on around him. You put a 5-star quarterback, though, at Auburn, a place that has won before, all of a sudden the thoughts of Stockton being a challenge to UGA just becomes a lot easier to believe. So today, I believe, is a win because Stockton isn't going to Auburn almost as much as it is a win that he is going to UGA.
And I think those are all good points, Brandon. And the thing you said about Monken resonated with me because remember his ideal quarterback, a guy that can get you some yards and move the chains when everything else breaks down, a guy that can be accurate, a guy that can stretch the field vertically. Well, Stockton is going to hit hit the cylinders there. He's about 6'1". He's about 210 pounds. Got some, I would say, this is not in any way a discredit to anybody's throwing motion, but I would say this would be a souped-up 2023 type Tim Tebow type runner in college football, where he's not going to run all over the place. I think he runs a lot at Raven right now. I don't think he will run a lot, even though he's very compact and stout. I don't think he's going to run a lot in the future at Georgia, especially because he won't have to. He'll just have to be a distributor and get the ball out. And, man, all of a sudden, anybody that was at Georgia in charge of recruiting quarterbacks for 2023 certainly has a little load off his shoulders. Because, I mean, there's some great ones out there, man, but, I mean, there's some competitors out there, but I don't know many dudes that would sit there and say, well, I know JT's not going to be there, but there's the really stark possibility that at least one between two or three between Carson Beck, Brock Vandegrift, and Gunner Stockton are going to be there when they get there. And I think Georgia's quarterback room, if you want to sit there and feel good and look for a reason to maybe play some music tonight and, maybe tailgate a little bit on your back porch, this is a good day for Georgia football. This is a great day for Georgia football, and we'll just go ahead and say it. I think Georgia's quarterback room is pretty solid until 2024, 2025 at the earliest.
So Frank Patterson, our YouTube comment section, says, I wonder what Arch Manning thinks about Gunner Stockton coming in for the class of 2022, which is obviously a reference to a big-time 2023 quarterback, which I think is pretty funny. Let me do a couple of things here before we get ready to let you go. You touched on this a moment ago, and I want you to go a little bit deeper if you don't mind. Give me the full thumbnail of Stockton as a player. Those of us who saw him in that game against Prince Avenue Christian did see a guy that ran a lot there that night. How much do you think the willingness to run will be a part of his player profile as a college quarterback?
Yeah, I think that's going to be very limited, maybe like 7 to 8 carries per game. Brandon, here's the stat for me. At Raven County, man, it is not odd to see him, put up a 6-7 touchdown game. It's not odd for him to see him throw for 4 and run for 2. It's not odd. I mean, Brennan, he had 71 touchdowns this year, 45 through the air, 26 on the ground. That's a 71 touchdown season. Just to put that into perspective, folks, I think Herschel Walker had 81 career touchdowns at Johnson County and Wrightsville years and years ago, 45 years ago, 43 years ago. So, I mean, there's a number like Brandon. He's got 100. I mean, he's going to break the record with another just normal pedestrian Stockton year. He's going to go over 200 career touchdowns. I don't know if he's going to catch Trevor Lawrence's all-time passing record because he's going to need about 4,500 yards to get to 14,400, I think, something like that. He's already at 9,500 through 3 seasons. He's probably going to set with about another 40-yard season, the most passing touchdowns in his career. But that number that I kind of hovered around, total touchdown responsibility, when you look at touchdown passes and then you throw in touchdown rushes, I mean, it's unfathomable to think. It is Georgia 2A football. Let's clarify that. But these are just rewriting the record book type stuff where, I mean, if Gunner Stockton doesn't throw another pass, he is going to be one of the 6, 7, 8 all-time greatest high school schoolboy quarterbacks in the state of Georgia. He's still got one more season to go. I think he's maybe 9th overall in passing with that 9,500. We've got all those details in the Dog Nation story that's up there right now. But, man, it goes back to that game last fall when you saw Stockton versus Vandegrift, and everybody thought that was the Georgia quarterback of the future versus the South Carolina quarterback of the future. Well, as it turns out, and as the recruiting trail spins, these are now probably QB1 and QB2 or QB2 and QB1 for Georgia's room maybe in 2023 and 2024. I mean, it's kind of just stupid. And I mean that in the literal 2020 version. Sure. About, man, I can't believe this, what Georgia's doing on the recruiting trail at quarterback. We went through the history of that, and now what Stockton does. I mean, Brennan, there's a list that's going to go up on DogNation.com shortly about the players telling me, like, how this moves the dial for them with Stockton. What does that mean? I remember Marquise Groves Killebrew was telling me when he committed to Georgia maybe last spring and he said, dude, the two dudes I want to play with, that I've got to play with, are Gunner Stockton and Dayon Bowie. And now those two guys right now, presently, are the highest-rated commitments for Georgia in the 2022 class. They're still at number 3. I think this moves them to number 3 overall with 7 commitments. And now all of a sudden, Brandon, it's lined up very well with the Emmanuel Henderson decision in March, the Mikael Williams decision in March, the Kristen Miller decision in April. Georgia, as a force, and as a force for years and years to come, with an integral recruit in the 2022 cycle, is very much a real thing.
I want to let you go with this. We don't do this as much as I think we should, compare prospects across cycles, but obviously it's about to be very relevant, the comparison between Brock Vandegrift and Gunner Stockton. We saw Stockton's team beat Vandegrift's team earlier this fall. I don't put much, no pun intended, stock in that because Rabun County was, I believe, just a deeper team and would have been a point spread favorite, so to speak, in that game going into it, not to bring gambling into high school football, but you know the point that I'm mentioning here. The point is, when you isolate quarterback versus quarterback, how would you compare the two?
So Brock's about 6'3", about 215. Gunner's about 6 foot, 3/4, maybe 6'1", about 205, 210. Both have crazy velocity on their arms. Brock's a long strider. Both of these guys are well-schooled. They've got coaches in their family. They understand the game. It's very ironic that both of their dads of these elite 5-star quarterbacks, both of their dads were defensive coordinators, defensive, backs type secondary guys, gurus, and they both taught their sons what defenses try to do to harass and confuse quarterbacks from a very early age. You've got both guys. I mean, Brock's the guy that is going to be a big man to bring down. He's a long strider. You've got Gunner, who's more of a compact type tank type guy, like a Humvee type guy. He's going to get you some yards in between the tackles if you really need it. Gunner has proved to be very durable. I think one of the driving forces in how Rabun County, that game really, Rabun County had about 15 to 20 really good high school football players that would play anywhere, and I think Prince Avenue Christian only had about 10 or 11 that would do that. That was the difference in that game. But Gunner, in order to beat Brock Vandegrift that night, he had to run the ball about 30 times, and that was the difference. His legs were the difference. I think he had 3 or 4 touchdowns on the ground in that game. If everybody saw that game on ESPN. So when you see all these moving parts right there, I would say edge as a passer. When you look at all the things you have to do, I would say, both these guys in terms of a high school quarterback are high 9s on a 10-point scale. And I think Brock is probably a high 8 in terms of the running game. And I would probably give Stockton just because of his use. And I think he's been clocked, earlier in his high school career on grass at a 4.7 laser electronically. Both of these guys are really fast. It seems like one guy has shown more of a proclivity to be a runner in high school, where Brock Vandegrift has really focused on ball distribution. But this is like talking about the 2021 Maserati to the 2022 Maserati, because both of these guys, Brandon, you're trying to look for differences. They're both alpha competitors. They're both very well connected. They're both natural leaders of men. But, both of these guys have completion percentages in high school of over 67, 70 type percent for all of their seasons. And they're throwing the ball about 30 times a game, too. So both of these guys, I think the real comparison, and I don't know the answer to this, is Georgia's quarterback room in better shape than it ever has been before. That's going to be a tough point for a lot of folks to argue over the offseason about whether Vandegrift and Stockton in Athens at the same time are going to be better than Easton and Fromm, or then Fromm and Fields for that one season as well. But with these two guys, I think you might get multiple seasons with them both on the depth chart in Athens, and that would be the stark difference here.
Jeff, incredible reporting. Thank you so much for your time. It's a huge day for Georgia. 5-star quarterback for the class of 2022. Gunner Stockton is now in the fold for UGA. As Jeff alluded to, there is plenty more about this online at DogNation.com. I'll see you back here tomorrow for Dog Nation Daily, presented by Kroger. Jeff will get even into more detail on this. Huge day for the program. Great reporting by you. I will look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, guys, and 2 quick teases. One, the next story that's going to go up on Dog Nation is, if you don't know where that Gunner name comes from, you're going to read that story again on Dog Nation about why he was named Gunner Stockton and the special reasons behind that. And then another story today coming, calling the shot here, is the recruits in the 2022 cycle that are now deeply impacted by this news from Gunner Stockton.
Now you're speaking my language, Jeff. That's what I like to hear. Great stuff. I will talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.
All right, folks, we are on the board here for the class of 2022. Georgia getting a gigantic addition with the five-star quarterback, Gunner Stockton. A lot of reaction to this. I think there's weirdly, I'll peruse the comment section. I'll read more of these on the air in a moment. For my taste, I think there is way too much worry of, oh, my gosh, who's going to leave? What's going to happen? Listen, I said the other day that if it was up to me, maybe I wouldn't try to stack the quarterback room quite so deep to choose somebody and go to work with them. But honestly, bringing in good players is never a bad thing. And adding someone like Stockton to go along with everybody else who's there for Georgia is a very good thing. And my suggestion would be is if these guys, these competitors aren't worried about that, then you probably shouldn't be either. And, if you assume for a moment that, well, eventually somebody around Georgia is going to end up leaving, I'd say that's fine. Who you bring into the program is always more important than who goes out of the program. It's just about finding someone who is there and making that person into, a quality quarterback for you. I understand the hesitation given the fact that, a decision like this in the past maybe wasn't handled as well as it could be handled. I totally understand that. But this is, full stop, unequivocally, a great day for Georgia with Gunner Stockton in the fold. A couple of your comments and we'll get ready to wrap up after that. Jeff Horton mentions what this possibly means for Carson Beck. I honestly don't know. It is fair to point out, and I don't say this, disparagingly, but Beck is a different caliber of prospect than what both Griff and Gunner Stockton are. Now, what the 2020 season shows you is that it takes all kinds to really win at the highest level. An example of that was Mac Jones, who himself was not, five-star quarterback coming out of high school. I think the bowl school down in Jacksonville is where he went. He comes into the 2017 class along with Tua Tagovailoa, and he actually leaves Alabama the most decorated quarterback of any of the ones they've brought in as of late, even though his recruiting profile is a lot lower. So if Carson Beck shows patience, sticks around Georgia, who's to know and who's to say what his future couldn't be? Things could, have a potential of working out in a really big way for him. But obviously the attention that someone like Stockton is going to get is just going to be higher because he is a higher level of prospect. That's not a shot at Beck, who has a chance to be a really good player. It's just the truth. Joel Moody says he has some dog in him. It showed in the game against Brock Vandegrift. Yeah, I think the one thing you can't really question about Stockton at all is his willingness to be a competitor. I think he is a real competitor, and I think he's looking to compete that way. Anthony White says competition breeds excellence, and I think a lot of people feel that way. I think we also said that going into the 2018 season, and obviously it resulted in something that Georgia fans would have preferred not go down the way that it did. I just think that there's a lot that maybe internally could have been learned by Georgia by the way that played out then. And Justin Hunt thinks that that Beck may leave, and listen, he very well might. I'm certainly not going to wish him out the door here on this show right now. And as I said before, I would cite not just Jones, who I mentioned a moment ago to Alabama, but also what Kyle Trask did at Florida. As much as it pains me to admit, Trask, being as patient he was at Florida, his patience was eventually rewarded there as well. He had a very good year, even though that he was, chosen over, or other quarterbacks were chosen over him multiple times there in Gainesville. Green Soldier says, this is on YouTube, here's the deal, guys. If a kid will wait a year to play quarterback for Georgia, he knows he'll have a chance at a national championship at least twice in a 4-year career. This is an amazing pickup. I think that's exactly right. It just only furthers into the future the time that Georgia has to, to kind of figure out what it wants to do with its quarterback position and establish a little bit of a pecking order over the course of years here. Cartel McClendon asked a really interesting question. If you had to choose either one, who would you choose, Brock or Gunner Stockton? The only way I can answer that is to say that when all I thought that Georgia was going to have is Brock Vandegrift, I was plenty fine with Vandegrift. I'm obviously very glad that Gunner Stockton's coming into the class, but from a prospect standpoint, it's not like I thought Brock Vandegrift's good, but man, Gunner Stockton that'd be great for Georgia. I don't feel that strongly about Stockton to say that. I think this is one of those things where, I truly am willing to let this play out and see which of these two guys proves to be the best player in this situation. I think what may have happened in 2018 that some people want to remember is maybe both guys weren't given equal weight to have that actually happen, and that's what you hope happens with Gunner and Vandegrift, that both guys get a chance to show what they're all about, and truly the best man can then win. Let me do one or two more. We're going to get ready to go. Over here on Facebook again for a moment. Michael Ward on the subject of Gunner Stockton. Yeah, he's going into his senior year at Rabun County, was a South Carolina commit. The head coach at Rabun County is Jabo Shaw. Jabo Shaw was also a very good high school player in the state of Georgia at Flowery Branch, and is head coach there at Rabun County now. Jabo's brother Connor was a South Carolina quarterback and now is a South Carolina staffer, was a off-field analyst type guy, whatever you want to call it, player development type guy before this year. So Stockton's commitment to South Carolina was partially related to the connection his high school head coach had with South Carolina, and the fact that Mike Bobo's father, George Bobo, had been very close with the Stockton family for a long time. And so you had kind of multiple ties for Stockton to South Carolina, and that's ultimately what won out there. All of a sudden now, Mike Bobo's no longer at South Carolina. Connor Shaw is, but with Shane Beamer taking over as head coach, a lot of unknown situations with the Gamecocks right now, and ultimately that was enough to cause Stockton to reconsider. We knew George would be a factor the moment Stockton reconsidered. I assume, though, he was probably going to go to Auburn. So I'll say, maybe more so than the rest of the industry, maybe, but I'm pretty surprised by this. Now, I'm not surprised based on the last 12, 24 hours where all the chatter has been kind of accelerating around the Stockton news, but where I thought this thing would be probably a few weeks ago, I'm actually surprised we're sitting here talking about this right now. But we are, nonetheless, on a Kroger recruiting special. Gunner Stockton chooses UGA. All right, let me get maybe one more and we're going to get ready to go. Mark Morris says, going back to my hypocrisy, initially saying, I'm not quite so sure I want this much quarterback depth, and now saying, yay, this is great for Georgia. He says, if I'm going to be hypocrite number one, he says he'll be hypocrite number two. And Mark, thank you for joining me here on the hypocrisy bandwagon when it comes to what is really a fun day for the program and a very entertaining scenario to watch play out over the course of the next couple of years. As we get ready to wrap up here, let me remind you this. As you're heading towards the big game coming up in a couple of weeks, don't forget Super Bowl stuff. You can get stocked up for all your party needs right there with our friends at Kroger. Just stop by and shop and get loaded up with everything you need. Kroger taking good care of you as we head towards the big game, so make sure you check them out. Stop by and enjoy some great savings here right now. There is plenty more to read about this online at DogNation.com. Jeff Sintel will be back with us on Dog Nation Daily, presented by Kroger tomorrow, and we'll have a chance to kind of further the conversation of exactly what Stockton's presence in Georgia's 2022 class means here. And, of course, we'll have a chance to react about all of this on Cover 4 Live, Dog Nation video channels this evening. So if you're just joining us, here's what we've been discussing. Five-star quarterback Gunner Stockton of the class of 2022 has joined the Bulldogs class, choosing Georgia over Auburn. Big day for UGA, a devastating blow to Mike Bobo as he begins his career as Auburn offensive coordinator, and a tough time for the Tigers fans, who obviously were hoping for some momentum for new head coach Brian Harsin. Big win for Georgia, bad loss for Auburn, and that in itself makes it a good day. A lot to like about Gunner Stockton. We'll continue to cover this around Dog Nation, and see you very soon back here on the Dog Nation video channels.